Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Know Before You Go, brought to you by FanAmp and our Grand Prix Travel. Today we're going to be going over a couple of different races, too, Mexico and Las Vegas. And Mexico is kind of a staple on the calendar. It's been around for a few years. It's been the history of it. It's been on and off since 60s or 70s. But it's been back on the calendar. It's kind of an iconic staple. It won various awards as far as best Grand Prix to attend and things like that over the past years. And then following up with that, we're also going to be going over the Las Vegas GP, which is brand new. And we are just going to, since nobody's done it before, we're going to kind of speculate and dive into some of the ideas and hopefully get some good info and some local info today. And so joining us today, I've got a few guests. If you guys want to go through it, Greg.
Sure. I'm Greg, the founder of FanAmp. I've been to Mexico City last year. Loved it. It was an amazing trip. And then I've been to Vegas more times than I can count, but never for F1, obviously. So I'll try and share some advice from what I can remember.
Yeah. And Caitlin?
Yeah, I can go next. My name's Caitlin. I also work at FanAmp, community and engagement with Greg. I grew up in Vegas, so I have 18 years of experience, and I think I might have a lot more than Greg does, at least on the logistics and getting around angle, maybe not the partying angle. But I'm going to try to provide some semblance of information, the best that I have, also from my parents that has been funneled to me, who still live in Vegas. So we'll try to get as much info out there as possible.
We've also got Eduardo or Mapachivilla joining us today.
Hello. Well, I was born in the city of Mexico. I didn't live there for long, but I used to go, a lot of times because I live really close to it, and all my family lives there. Been to the race 3 times. Managed to see, I think, the 5th Lewis Hamilton championship in there. So really fun memories of the race.
I was at that one too.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. It's such a good vibe there, especially their photo solo. If somebody wins the title, the donuts. I mean, it's cool. Before we get into Mexico, I kind of wanted to touch on today's race. What do you guys think? It was, so Qatar, kind of a new circuit because they rebuilt it, but I thought that it produced some really cool racing. It was nice to see passes around the outside, and I guess the whole part about the tires was kind of not a great look, but it provided a different level of excitement to the race.
I was going to say, I actually am a fan of this.
Yeah, it was cool.
They should spin a wheel every time there's some sort of thing that goes wrong, and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think I have a completely different take. We were talking about this before we went live, but the fact that multiple drivers had to go to the medical center for heat stroke is kind of very concerning. And adding that onto the tire degradation issue with the weird curbs, but also just the resurfaced track that didn't look very resurfaced to me. I think this was not the best race weekend. It was entertaining for sure, but I'm big on safety. I don't know. It's maybe I'm just the mom friend, the mom spectator, but not a fan of people putting themselves in actual jeopardy.
Yeah, I do like that. It really I like when it tests the limits, because it's not just about driving in some of these cars. Like Singapore, those drivers lose a ton of body weight just by sweating, and it's cool to see drivers struggle because at the same point they can just drive slower, and that it's a real mental and physical toll on them. And I think it's good for the sport. Yeah, it sucks, especially hearing what Ocon got sick. That's terrible. But these guys are the best athletes in the world, in racing, and they need to prove it. And I feel like adding a different element is a good way for them to prove themselves in different ways, I think. Eduardo, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was also concerned a bit about the safety of some drivers, but I think that the racing was cool. I think it was nice to see them doing different strategies.
Lose him?
No, we lost him.
And maybe he'll rejoin in a bit.
Different strategies.
I thought I did something. I thought that was.
I think I'm back.
Yeah, we hear you now.
Sorry, just connection issues. No, I was saying that, it's concerning about the safety of the drivers, but I think the racing was interesting, actually. Some very interesting overtakes, Some of them didn't go well, as Hamilton and Checo find out through the weekend.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that they were trying to do like those overtakes on the outside that you don't normally see on some of the tracks was an interesting point to for the race. And I think that the FIA is going to have some ideas out of the positive points of this weekend. Obviously, that I don't know.
Yeah, I think there'll be some changes in the future, and they might. I read that they might change because they have specifics on the way the tracks build their curbs to FIA certification, and I think they might produce some changes because of this weekend, which is a good thing.
I mean, the track limits thing, like at some point you got to figure that out, right?
Yeah, I really like the curbs at Degna 2 at Suzuka, where the cars that go over, they bottom out, and I feel like if they have some kind of punishment that isn't going to throw them off the track or into a wall, it's a fine line, because it's the same with Austria at that final corner where they just kept running wide, and then you had all these track penalties and nobody knew where anybody finished. And that's why I see Qatar having the same issue, and hopefully they think of something for next year at both circuits. All right, so let's get into Mexico City.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so Mexico, it's a great city to visit. It's one of my favorites to travel to. I'm lucky. It's a 2-hour flight from Austin, and I've been to that race, I think 4 times. I've seen Lewis win a title there a couple times. There's just a wide variety of ways to do this race, because you're limited to your section. It's not the type of circuit like Coda, for example, where you can just walk around. You have a specific entrance for your section, and you're limited to the amenities of your section, usually by color or by grandstand number. But for the city itself, Mexico is just awesome to visit. It's fairly cheap compared to most destinations that F1 races at. The most expensive parts of the trip will likely be your flight and your race ticket. You can find some pretty reasonable accommodations. It just really depends on what part of the city you want to stay in or experience. There's a lot of different areas. And Eduardo, what have you got to say about Mexico City and the Grand Prix in general?
Yeah, I mean, talking about the city is enormous. I mean, even if you look at the numbers, it's one of the biggest cities in the world. So obviously, as such, you are going to find anything that you want. I mean, there are pyramids to visit inside of the city. There are museums. There are shows. And the good thing about the date of the Mexican Grand Prix is that it's really close to Dia de Muertos. So then you have also all these festivities that happen at the same time that you can see the race. So I think it's a really cool event if you are interested also like in the culture of Mexico, because I think that also the organizers of the race, they do a big effort of trying to showcase not only the race, but also the culture of Mexico. And I think that is something unique of this race and something very cool for people that come from other places in the world, that they can enjoy what it's a small part, obviously, but what it's a part of the Mexican culture. That is something that I have really liked about the organization. There's also, I mean, I think the only race where they use a different team, or a Formula One team with mariachis. So they have like these kind of things that they dare to do, and that I think that it gives a really good differentiator to this race, honestly.
Yeah, they had there was an Alpine shirt. I should have actually worn it today, but I bought it because it had the skulls, the colored skulls kind of dotting out on the back. And it was just the only race I've seen this year that had merchandise like that was Japan, with Suzuka, sort of like thematically. And I think it just fits to the whole area. And the Dia de los Muertos weekend is just such a cool overlap, as you can explore all the art installations around the city. Like it's just it just feels different.
Yeah, Greg, did you go to the Centro Histórico, like Zócalo, during the parade last year?
No, not this time when we were here. So I'd been once before, and we actually went back with the same group, but we didn't go this past time.
Yeah,
but we had been in the past, and so we just explored the city. The nice thing too, like about this, is it's in the middle of the city, and so for some of the other races, like that's my preference. But you're not. There's a bit of travel, I guess, right? Because it's a big city. There's a lot of traffic, and that's one thing to be mindful of. But you don't have to leave the city limits to get to the track, which I think is a really nice thing for this place.
Yeah. I've been to the parade and stuff going on downtown by Zocalo for the Dia de los Muertos, and it's insane. I feel like that's probably the most people I've ever seen in one place. It's very crowded, but it's a good, fun vibe, and it's safe. I feel like that's one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people have for traveling to Mexico, is that they have this image of Mexico being unsafe, but the government really puts in a lot of effort into making sure that people visiting Mexico City are safe. And you'll see a lot of police or military presence around the event. And in general, you're traveling to a foreign country, and you need to keep your wits about you and be aware. But overall, it feels very safe. There's parts of Austin where I feel less safe than I do in Mexico City. That's one of the biggest concerns I think a lot of people have, where it doesn't cross their mind about going to Mexico because they think that it's, kind of this really dangerous place. But overall, it's very easy to get around. It's easy to get from the airport. It's cheap to Uber. Overall, it's just an easy race to do. And because, like Greg, you mentioned that it's basically in the city, it's connected well by public transportation. And then Uber, you can get across Mexico City in Uber for $20.
Yeah.
It's very cheap.
You guys are convincing me to go to Mexico City. Sorry, Greg. I will not be here.
No, go.
Yeah, I realized a little while ago that I'm doing 3 of the next 4 races, and I was like, oh, it's going to be rough.
No, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
We flew down when we did it. We flew to Mexico City. I know there's some other airports in the area, but that's the big international hub. They're a Delta partner. So that adds a lot of flexibility within the US to get down there. But how did you guys both get down?
Eduardo?
Yeah, in my case, the times that I've been, I was driving because I lived in a city that is like 2 hours north of the city of Mexico. So it was very convenient for me to drive there. And I usually either stayed with family or I rented an Airbnb, a place like that, which is really cheap. You can get really cool places in some of downtown areas that are also kind of like, they have a different vibe. That's one thing. A lot of people, since the circuit is inside of the city, a lot of times they have asked me if it's good to stay close by to the circuit, and I don't think it's the best area. What I always recommend for accommodation inside is just staying somewhere that is close to a metro station, and it's very easy to move around in the city. Like you mentioned also, there's a lot of traffic. It's a very big city, so traffic is to be expected. But it's also, with Google Maps or anything, it's easy just to move around, to find parking places. And also, I think that the race also organizes a lot of shuttle buses that you can park in a shopping center that it's like half an hour, 40 minutes away, and then take a bus that takes you to the race. So there are a lot of different options that you can take to move around in the city.
Yeah. So there is as you mentioned, right, there's the metro. There's also on the south side, and we can flip to it in a second, but the metro bus that stops. And one of the things that we did, we went with a group, but we found a bus company and they were actually incredibly reasonable, and we rented it for the weekend. And so basically they would come in the morning, you'd take it for the day, they drop you off, and then they pick us up near the circuit. And it was actually pretty easy to get in and out and coordinate. No issue with cell service, no problems at all. And it was very affordable versus the alternative of an Uber, to and from, and having a group made it easy.
Yeah. So Uber, they typically have they have an organized rideshare area on the left side of this image. It's the Velodromo. That's usually where they have a designated drop-off point for the event itself. And the circuit does run shuttles along the perimeter of it, just outside the gates. It's basically along the main roads, but it's an easy way to get around or get to and from if you decide to take Uber. Uber will drop you off outside your gate typically, but then to pick up an Uber out of the circuit, you either need to walk out of the area and request one, or go to the designated Uber drop-off pickup, because they try to make it so that everybody's, I guess, to try to ease up the traffic, to designate one specific area for it. And when I've done that, it's usually not too bad of a wait, but public transport's a really good way to go. Another thing that I've done before is when you walk outside the gate, you're going to see a lot of private drivers, like off-duty Uber drivers who have the lights on and stuff like that you can hire, or taxis. And the taxis, they're safe. You just need to make sure and negotiate a rate before you get in, because sometimes they can either drive you around or take you the long way around. And if you negotiate a rate and agree to a rate before you get in, let them know where you're going to go. It's a good option, and it's a good way to just save some time, because once the race ends, you walk out the gate, you just kind of got to try to get out, because the traffic in Mexico City is kind of gnarly. But public transportation is another great option. The Brown line takes you right up to a couple of different spots, and with that and taking the perimeter shuttle around the circuit is a really good option to both arrive and leave. There's also a bus line at the bottom of this image that can get you away from the circuit pretty easily, and you can also connect to one of the metro lines a little bit further. There's a few stops, but yeah, Eduardo, what's your take on the public transport?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite means of transportation is the metro. I think it's very cheap. I don't know what is the current price, but it's less
Like
than
20
$1.
cents US.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can move all the weekend with like $2.
It's $2.90 now in New York one way, so it's
Yeah.
dramatically
it's
different.
crazy cheap.
It's five
It's
pesos,
crazy
which
cheap.
is 20 cents US.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy cheap to move around. So that's why I always use the metro. And it gets a bit crowded, especially leaving the circuit on Sunday. But it's not a big issue. I mean, you just like any also public transportation in any race, you just wait for a few minutes and then you can move around. And you can get to downtown in 20, 25 minutes, something like that.
Yeah. What's your take on the safety for foreigners for taking the metro, or any tips?
Yeah, I mean, Mexico City, I mean, obviously, like you said, when you hear Mexico, you kind of get all of these ideas of lacks of safety and security issues. And yeah, I mean, there are places in the country where these things happen, but the city of Mexico is not one of them. The city of Mexico is a big place, so obviously you need to be mindful and you need to be careful not to get yourself in a dangerous situation. But when they organize the city, they make sure that everything that connects you to the city is really safe. And it's like you said, there's a lot of policemen, there's a lot of security going around. So yeah, as long as you stay like within these touristic areas, I mean, there's not much to be aware of. It's just being mindful of your surroundings, and you are going to go. Honestly.
Following the crowds is kind of a big easy thing that you can do. Just stick with people and try not to wander down any roads that look completely isolated or empty. And because, like Eduardo, you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, is some of the areas around the circuit, you don't necessarily want to walk around by yourself. But as long as there's other people around, or my key kind of instinct that I keep is if there's women and children out and about, then it's probably completely fine.
Exactly.
To be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot to do.
I was going to say, Adam also follows the run faster than someone else when a bear is chasing you mentality.
Well, I didn't grow up in the woods, but yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I was saying that there's also not that much to do around the circuit, honestly. I mean, in this map, you can see everything there is around that area. And it's all encircled by the public transportation. So, yeah, I mean, you just get to the circuit, go out of the circuit, and then go to actually the touristic areas in the city. And that's good.
Yeah. You mentioned, Eduardo, when you were staying there that you've done a lot of Airbnbs. We were the same when we went down with a group. Like, there was a really nice house, incredibly comfortable, and it was very, very affordable. I forget the number per head, but it might have been 100 or 200 a person for the weekend. So like very, very reasonable, especially considering like you could stay at a hotel for a lot more. Like, have you stayed at multiple Airbnbs? Have you stayed at any of the hotels in the city? And then I guess same for you, Adam, although I think I know the answer.
Yeah, Eduardo, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, in my case, sometimes I stayed with family. Sometimes I stayed, but mostly on Airbnbs. I honestly didn't use hotels that much because it was just cheaper to do the Airbnb. And I mean, since I'm from there, it was easy for me to move around. And yeah, like you say, you can get some really nice apartments, and if you just reserve them on time, they're going to be very cheap. I mean, I had once an apartment that was actually not far from the one that is in the image, that had a beautiful view to the Castillo de Chapultepec,
That's a really
and it
cool
was
area.
cheaper than any hotel that I could find. So you can get like these crazy good locations for very cheap if you just know how to look around.
Yeah, I've stayed in a few different areas. I really like Condesa or Roma Norte. I keep going back to Roma Norte. I've also stayed in the Centro Histórico by Zocalo. But yeah, Roma Norte is kind of my vibe, where it's just walking around the restaurants. I love seeing the giant trees. It's a really good area to stay. And I also like the biggest thing that I always notice in Mexico City is the noise. The city does not stop. It's just 24/7 traffic and noise. And sometimes if you're on a hotel on a major street, it just doesn't stop the noise. And so it's good to have earplugs for at night, just in case that is a thing, and you want to get some good sleep, especially having long weekends. But that's also another reason why I like Airbnbs and like Condesa Roma Norte, because you can stay in a more residential area, and you're most likely, the noise that's going to be happening in the morning is somebody yelling down the street because they're selling washers or dryers or propane, because that's a very big thing in some of those areas on the weekends. But you can typically find a nice Airbnb for like $100-$150 a night. Like it's completely reasonable.
Yeah.
And you can like find a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, like, and split it with a group type of place. It's very easy, very reasonable to do.
Yeah, we stayed in Coyoacan. I was trying to say it earlier, and I'm just going to butcher it, but it was very residential. There was a grocery store like right down the other side of the block. It made it really easy, like when you fly in for a long weekend, to stock up on everything, and it just was good. And we were also on the south end of that highway heading over to the track, so it made the traffic feel a little bit better getting to and from. So
yeah,
worth a shot. It's more removed from where you were, Adam, but still was good.
Yeah, the only downside about
Yeah,
staying
no.
at Condesa Roma Norte is it's a little further, where it's like the metro. The metro will be like a 10 to 20-minute walk, depending on where you stay. And then sometimes during peak times, it can be hard to get an Uber from over there, because it'll say it's like a 10-minute wait until you pick up, but then it's really about 30 minutes because they're stuck in traffic somewhere trying to get to you. And so sometimes it can be kind of hard to get an Uber out in that area, just because it's kind of on the opposite end of the city. But like you touched on earlier, Eduardo, is Chapultepec is a really nice area. And also Polanco is kind of the high end area where a lot of the drivers stay. And so that's kind of where a lot of the big attraction is to some of the people visiting Mexico City.
Yeah.
All right, so let's touch on tickets now. And so for tickets, we've got pretty much all grandstands, because this circuit doesn't have any general admission. And so because it's grandstands, the tickets are kind of pricey. They've always been on the higher end of the scale for Formula One tickets. The cheapest ones you're going to find are usually at Forosol, or I believe there's an orange section where it's kind of along a straightaway between, from the starting grid over to turn one. You don't get a great view there, so those tickets are fairly cheap. But the Forosol, which is sections 14 and 15, is the former baseball stadium. And it's now where they have a bunch of concerts and stuff like that. And that's just an awesome vibe. But those tickets are, I believe this year they were about 600. Just like every other race, they've been going up in price. But I believe that those are the cheapest grandstand seats you'll get. I think the next ones up are probably the turn one area, which are around the $800 range. And then you go up from there over to the yellow section. Grandstands 10 and 11 are, I think, around 1100. It's crazy because last year I paid 700. So it's like everything has just gone up in price. They were already kind of pricey. And so, yeah, they keep going up, but they still sold out in minutes. This race is very difficult to get tickets through from the circuit itself. They go and sell through Ticketmaster, and they typically do some pre-sales for Mexican residents who have some specific credit cards. But yeah, Eduardo, where have you sat for this race?
I've seen both in the Photosol and the grandstand that you were mentioning, the 2A, which is right in the middle of the main street, just because it was the cheapest one. So it was the first time I went there, so I bought that ticket. It's not a great view, but it's honestly a nice vibe, because if you get lucky, you can also see the pit stops from there. So if you have a little bit of luck, you can get nice view also of the first turn. So yeah, I mean, and one thing that I really love about the Mexican Grand Prix is that since everything is grandstand and you don't have like this general admission area, absolutely every seat has a view of a screen and you have nice sound. So not doesn't matter where you are sitting, you can have like a really good idea of what is happening all through the race. That was very different from my experience, at least, for example, here in the races in Italy, in Monza and in Imola, where you can sometimes have to kind of like hunt for the screens. In Mexico, you don't have to worry about that. So you're always going to have a screen. So I think that is something really nice. But something that I think it's also worth mentioning is the concert that they do after the race, because they always invite a DJ or somebody who is going to do music, but not all the tickets have access because of what you were mentioning, that you cannot move around in the areas. So I think it's only the ones that have the photosol and the main grandstands, the ones that have access to the concert.
Green or verde and the photo solo 14 and 15 that get access to the post-race concert. And that's a really cool thing to do, because you can actually, to get to the concert, you can walk onto the track and where the drivers are doing the podium, and where, you know, it's a really good experience to do. And that's one of the big perks about sitting at the photo solo section. Not only the crowd is great, but you get the pre-race celebration where they do a big parade. It's usually the Los Muertos themed. But there's a whole pre-race. During the race is just insanely loud. That's probably one of the loudest crowds you can be in. And then post races, you see the podium. I've seen Lewis do donuts when he won the titles a couple of times in 17. That one really stood out to me. And then the post race DJ, it's a pretty good party, and it's a good way to wait out some of the traffic as well. There are some hospitality options that can, I believe they're called the Skybox, is what the circuit sells them as. At the top of Photosol, they have some kind of like box seats areas. Typically, every grandstand does have some of their box seats. Those prices are expensive, but they usually come with food and drink included. And sometimes they coordinate a way to get to it from the track, but those are several thousand per person kind of thing. It's more of like a suite hospitality compared to just a single hospitality ticket. And so the prices can really fluctuate. But then F1 Experiences does do some packages where you can buy, a mix of the pre-race events or post-race events combined with the grandstand ticket. My favorite places to sit, if it's your first time going to this race, I would definitely try to sit at Photosol if you can. The second option is probably the turn 1 area, the blue zone, just because that's where some of the most overtaking is for the circuit. And then I sat at yellow 11 last year and I had an incredible time. There's a lot of really good racing at that section too, but that area acts like a stadium, and it was very loud and a lot of really good amenities. And the good thing about the yellow section is that the fan zone for this race is located inside the blue zone. But if you have a yellow ticket, that's the only way, or that's a different way to get to the fan zone. That's, I guess, the only way to get into a different zone during the race weekend. Is if you have yellow access, you can get into the blue section, so you can get to the fan zone where they do the pit stop experience, and they have just a lot more food vendors and things like that, which the food vendors vary by section. That it's something that's not consistent across each section. And so the tickets are more expensive, but you usually get more out of it. And so that's where Photosol is a bit limited, both because it's a smaller area, but they don't have the same food vendors that they do at some of the other sections. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that for the ticket prices. But if you're going for the first time, I would definitely recommend sitting in Photosol just to take in the atmosphere. I mean, it's a vibe. It's insane. It's so fun. Every time Checo passes by, it's like he won the race for all of 70 laps. It's insane.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be discouraged if you're not in one of those sections.
Yeah.
Because we were in Blue 9, like we had never been before. We had no idea, and it was amazing. Like the vibe just of everyone felt like a festival. And I know some of the races try for that, but it falls short. Here it was like people wanted to be there. They were hanging out for a while after the race, just like grabbing drinks along picnic tables. The music was playing. So it was a really fun vibe. And so even without the concert, like I think it was Martin Garrix last year, like even without being able to see Martin, you still had a good time. So
Yeah, I think they showed on the
you
screen.
can go regardless.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind about this circuit is, I guess the biggest key points I wanted to touch on before we transition to a little bit more Mexico City is the sections are, you're limited to your section. And so you have specific entrance you need to get to. So to keep that in mind, and there's no general admission, meaning you can't explore the track either. They don't take cash at the circuit. Last year, it was the first time they implemented a prepaid card, which is very easy to do. You paid the card. It's actually a really cool souvenir because it's got the whole artwork with the race poster. It comes with the lanyard. It was like $1, and then you just have to top it up so that all the vendors had tap to pay. Don't think Monza. This worked really efficient. It was a good way of not having to fumble with cash or to slow down transactions. But just something to keep in mind is those vendors took cash and card. But I was able to use card just fine, and I don't have to worry about carrying cash. The only reason I would carry cash from Mexico City is to pay for a taxi or a driver to and from the circuit. And outside the circuit, one thing that's kind of fun is there's a lot of like fake merchandise. You can get some really fun gifts for really cheap. Like I've got some Red Bull shirts from my mom, just comfy long sleeve shirts if they get messed up, whatever. They're $5, and you're supporting somebody. You're giving the money to a person who's just trying to make a living. And so they're fun gifts. And I mean, I think I got 2 shirts and a hat for like $10. Yeah, Eduardo, do you have anything to add before we kind of transition away, or we could just start talking about Mexico City in general? There's a lot of really good food.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is the access for the Foro Sol section, which is not actually from the side of the circuit. You need to go to what you already mentioned, Palacio de los Deportes, which is the orange building with the bridges there. Yes. So to access the Foro Sol area, you have these 2 bridges that you need to access from the other side of the street. So if anybody has a ticket for those 2 areas, they need to go to the part that it's called Palacio de los Deportes, which is where it's all the Uber drop-off area. And then you take the bridge, and then you get to the circuit. That's the only thing that I would just add to this.
Yeah, one thing that I found last year also sitting at the yellow section was I went a little south once the race, or once qualifying ended. We went a little further south, just walking away from the circuit, and we stumbled into this food market that was getting set up for the evening. It was outside of like an actual market, but they set up food stalls in the streets, and it was a lot of really good food. It was something geared more towards locals. I don't think that they really expect people from the race because it's probably about a 10-minute walk. But I felt safe. My wife felt safe, and we had some really good food. And I tipped them very well. And they tried to give me plenty of food to go, and I was like, no, I don't need anything more. A lot of really good, friendly people, and a lot of really good food. But Mexico. Before we transition away, Mexico City has a lot of really good tourist things to do. Aside from just the race itself, I mean, there's a lot of history, like the Frida Kahlo Museum, the Bellas Artes, the art museum. Going to Zocalo and seeing all the art installations that they do for Dia de los Muertos is pretty cool. There's a lot of good food in the city, a lot of really kind of a high-end cocktail bar, or not just one, there's a bunch, but you can get a really big variety of things to do. Yeah, Eduardo, what do you recommend for somebody visiting the city for the first time? What are like the 3 or 5 places you would kind of hint somebody to visit?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot on the vibe that you want to have because, I mean, like I said, Mexico City has an experience for everyone. A big thing about of what makes Mexico City is street food. Street food is big, is delicious, and it's cheap. So if you don't have such weak stomach and you can handle that food, it's amazing if you want to actually try it. That's one of my favorite parts about going to Mexico City, honestly, the street food. But there's also like more, let's say, like sitting restaurants that you can get to if you want to see like a cool part, and then it's close to some of the areas that we already mentioned for staying. It's Mercado Roma. Mercado Roma is a nice kind of like hipster type restaurant thing where you kind of like buy your stuff and then you find a table and you sit in there. Apart from that, inside of the city, going to Chapultepec, there's a zoo and there's also the castle of Chapultepec that is really, really cool to visit. I mean, you kind of like don't think there is a castle inside of the city of Mexico, but there is one, and it's really, really pretty. So that is something. Yeah, and there's also it's a museum. It's like a complex where you have like a park, zoo, and there's also the castle with the museum. So that is really, really nice to go to. And if you like architecture, the downtown of Mexico is if you like architecture, downtown Mexico is super, super nice also to just look at the buildings.
Yeah, one thing I'd recommend before you go and you're curious about some of the history or just the street food in general, watch a couple episodes of the Netflix show Taco Chronicles. They really dive into some of that stuff, and some of those spots can get really hard to get into now because they've created a ton of lines, but it'll just give you a bit of a grasp on like what some of the food is, some of the meats and how they're cooked, because it's ridiculous. It's just so
al
good.
pastor tacos all day.
Yeah.
Day.
I could eat like literally 30 of them. I eat way too much.
Yeah, and exactly when you get here, you start to notice that there's a taco for every occasion. So there are some tacos that are for breakfast, there are some tacos that are for dinner, and you kind of like cannot start to understand when it's each taco for.
I like nopales and papas for breakfast.
My one restaurant recommendation will be Contramar. That was an amazing meal every time we've been.
So, where is that one?
I recommend. I'll look it up for you. Hold on.
I'm curious. There's this, for you mentioned al pastor, and now I'm hungry. There's this one place called
It's not too far from
Yeah, there's one place called El Tizoncito in Condesa that's been like one of my favorites, where you order 2 or 3 or however many you want, and they make them for you really fast and bring them out to you, and they bring you a salsa tower. It's got 3 or 4 different salsas and some refried beans and chips. And I probably, for our table, we fed 4 people, and I think it was less than $20 for just way too much food and a few beers. Prices are very reasonable down there, and it's going towards local restaurants and things like that. So that's where it's just Mexico City is a great experience. I definitely recommend everybody go.
Yeah, but also, I mean, if you want like a more high-end restaurant, going to Polanco, you can find a lot of options. There's even Michelin star restaurants in the city of Mexico, so you get all this range from street food, like super cheap street food, all the way to like really, really high-end restaurants, which I haven't tried. I know that they are there.
There's also a lot of really good vegetarian and vegan options as well, so don't think that you're strictly restricted to eating meat. There's a lot of really good options. You can get things like vegan ramen. I mean, it is with a Mexican twist on it. And so you can get all kinds of different stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Should we jump to Vegas?
Yeah, let's do it.
Kayla, we're going home.
So, so Vegas is kind of it's a race that's been in the works for a few years, and it's new to everybody. There hasn't been a street race for Formula One in America in a long time. I feel like Miami doesn't really count. It's kind of, they use a couple of former public roads, but it's mostly in the parking lot around the Miami circuit, along with some of the infrastructure roads for the stadium. So I feel like that is, Vegas is a true street circuit, and it's going to be, the images are going to probably be iconic as far as all the sites that you have along the strip. The city is known for its just constant party and nightlife, but we'll see how F1 goes here. It's going to be different, and I think it's going to be a kind of awakening for a lot of people as far as the the way F1 makes their events in America. It's going to be, or it is expensive, but it's going to be expensive just to do anything. The roads are going to be limited. It's going to be hard to walk around. There are some general admission tickets, but it's not true general admission. It's more of a standing room only and sphere area. So you're going to be limited to that area. And speaking on that path, it's kind of the way Mexico is your ticket gives you access to your section. They're calling them zones. Like I have a ticket for the main grandstand, and so I'm only limited to the area around the main grandstand and the pit building. So it's not going to be easy to get around the circuit, which we'll touch on in a bit with Caitlin's local perspective. But this is going to be new. It's going to be expensive, and hopefully we get a good race, and hopefully just enough spice to make it interesting. So we're not just staring at a bunch of lights and cars flying by.
I mean, you've seen the track. I'm not certain that we're going to get much spice.
Yeah, I know. They're just a long straightaway.
Straights, yeah.
There's a little turn on there. They added a turn on the middle of that straightaway.
Yeah.
I think
And they've been building that turn since early this year. So.
Okay. Well, before we get into the track itself, how do you get to Vegas? Like I've gone only by flying into, well, you corrected me because it just changed names. It used to be McCarran, now it's Harry Reid.
Correct. Yeah. Named after our late former senator. So I'm not going to lie to you guys. Greg made me talk about these other airports. I personally would never suggest flying into Phoenix or LAX and then driving to Las Vegas for two reasons. One being the traffic, no matter what time of year, what time of day, regardless, unless you are driving at 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. to get between the two, is going to be terrible. You are driving through desert and nothingness. There's no lights. It is one road going this way, one going back. I do not suggest doing that. However,
like Texas.
It's it's just unsafe. It's simply unsafe. There are crashes almost every single day because people are falling asleep at the wheel or just like losing focus, and off into the desert you go. And it's also bumper to bumper the entire time. So ends up taking, it says 4 to 5 hours. I would say I've done it before, probably 8. Unless, again, you are leaving at 1 a.m. and driving through the night, which is unsafe in its own way. Obviously, I know flying into Las Vegas is extremely expensive right now. They are price gouging like crazy. I booked my flights months in advance, which I never do, to fly home. But the prices are insane. I would say, I mean, it's October 8th right now while we're doing this. Look, within the next week or two, it's possible that flights are going to drop. I don't think they will. I will say one fun fact about flying into Vegas, if you've never done this, is when you're landing, it kind of feels like your plane's going to crash most of the time because there's a lot of turbulence. So if you do fly to Vegas and land at the airport, which is conveniently located directly next to the Strip, I will say that is very convenient. Don't be freaked out when the plane is shaking and moving everywhere while you're landing. That is very usual, normal. Las Vegas is in a giant box of mountains, essentially. So the wind is a huge factor there. But as a general note, I would only fly into Las Vegas. I would not spend the money getting a car and driving. You will hate yourself if you do that.
So I'm doing exactly what you said not to do.
Where are you flying?
I'm flying to LA the day before because I had it. So a flight from Austin to Vegas was around $1,800 per person.
That's crazy.
And so I found flights from here to LA. I was able to do a mix in about $200 round trip. And a rental car prepaid out of LA was $400 for a week. And so it was still cheaper for me to fly to LA. And then I have a free night certificate. I'm staying at a fancy hotel in Santa Monica.
That's nice.
Yeah. And so we're going to fly to LA and then stay the night. And then the next day pick up the rental car and drive to Vegas. And so that's great insight about the traffic. I'll try to plan for that. Mm-hmm. But I'm used to driving like that because I live in Texas and there's long stretches of nothing.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if you're used to it, absolutely go ahead. It's more the opportunity cost than the actual tangible cost. Also, I'd
Yeah.
love to know what airline you were trying to fly that was $1,800.
Delta.
If I look right, yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Fly
I have
Delta.
medallion status. I fly with Delta a lot, so
I know. I totally understand. Greg is the exact same way. We had this
Yeah.
exact conversation yesterday.
It
So-
was from New York. It was $2,500 if you wanted to fly Thursday to Monday,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is like, I mean, you could have gone to Asia twice for
Yeah.
that same price. Like,
And that's
they're-
why. So I'm using a mix of points and dollars combined with the rental car. It's still cheaper than one ticket from Austin to Vegas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. I mean, you could look at the dates like plus or minus, but even with that, I think a lot of people have been forced to that with the price.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, you can still get deals like it, and you got one, right? But like,
Yeah.
I think by and large, like even the hotels knew this was coming and withheld inventory until it got to be close enough when they knew all the dates and specifics. And so all the prices for this have been elevated. And I guess on that point, like in terms of options to stay, like historically when we've done it, we've stayed at the Strip. You stay at a hotel, you're right there, it's convenient. Like, what are your guys' thoughts? What are you doing? Adam, are you doing an Airbnb this time? Because I know that's
So-
typically.
I have a couple different things reserved because I messaged my Airbnb today to figure out if they're going to cancel on me or not, because I booked it in July last year, ahead of the dates being announced. And so I just kind of rolled the dice on that. And then as soon as I was able to book a hotel when they announced it, or once they opened the booking, I was able to find one for about $180 a night. It's a bit of a drive away, but I'll figure it out. It's still better than the original $1,000 a night most hotels were charging. But like I looked this morning, and you can actually book some hotels for less than $200 a night, because as times have, or as the sales have kind of struggled, or interest in this season has struggled, the prices have dropped again. The race isn't sold out because they priced everything really high at first, thinking everything was going to sell out immediately, but they withheld inventory and tried to manufacture some scarcity, in my opinion. And hotels, they originally priced everything high, thinking everybody was willing to pay, and so everything kind of struggled to sell and fill up. And eventually, they started offering rooms to some of their regular gamblers and things like that, where if they bought race tickets for $5,000 for 2 tickets, they would give them a free hotel for the week, or however many days it was, which is just crazy. And then now you can get hotels. I looked at the Hilton stuff this morning, and I found a couple that were just something basic. It was like a DoubleTree, and it was like $190 or $201 a night, and that was from the 15th through the 19th. And so that's full on race week, and it's really not that far away.
No, that's at the new Resort World, right?
Well, there was that one too. I think that one was a little bit over 200.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so prices have kind of normalized now that they've been struggling a bit. So you might, if you did book for something really expensive ahead of time, you might want to see if you can cancel and rebook at what the current rates are, because that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out right now is what's going to happen with my Airbnb, because Airbnb is actually like, it's right near the main grandstand. And I think I'll have
Jason.
Yeah, I know. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but I booked it way before like anything was announced, as kind of a gamble. And so I don't know if that's going to work out. If not, I'm going to find a hotel and figure that whole part out, because I do have another hotel reserved that is cancelable. And so I just kind of have my options open.
I will say, when you're booking things that are near the Strip but not on the Strip, please be cognizant of looking at reviews and things. Vegas is interesting. The Strip is here, and it kind of goes out in like circles, like think Hunger Games districts kind of energy. The closer you are to the Strip without being on the Strip, it is very dangerous. It is very dangerous. It is not safe at all. It's like for you, you are probably fine. But if there's any like women who are watching this, or just people who are like not adults that have been to a ton of races, probably been to Vegas many times before, if you're younger, stay a little bit farther away from the Strip if you're not directly on the Strip or staying downtown. It's just not a safe neighborhood at all. And I went to high school right off of the Strip. So like I spent 4 years being in that really bad neighborhood, and we could not leave campus. Like we had cops on every corner every single day. So just something to keep in mind. Adam, you are probably fine. But if you are not somebody like Adam, who's been to a lot of races, obviously a grown man, I would be very cognizant of that, and, sacrifice staying a bit further away, or finding like obviously a hotel on the Strip to stay at.
Yeah, it's
I
something to
think
be
on that,
mindful of traveling in America. Certain cities, there's a lot of places you just don't want to be, and that's kind of the part of like following crowds and keeping an eye on your surroundings. If you feel like you're the only person somewhere and the street's kind of empty and it's dark, you probably don't really want to be there. And that's where
Yeah.
if I'm with a partner or somebody, I usually one person is navigating, the other person's kind of keeping watch.
Paying attention.
That's just kind of how we travel.
Yeah,
Yep.
but even with Vegas, like I mean, of every time I've gone to like your point, Caitlin, like off that strip area, it is undeveloped. A lot of the buildings have like
Yes,
come and gone, are dilapidated. Like it's obviously not the part that they're like looking for you to look at, and it's also not a place you really want to be wandering. So I would agree with that.
I would even say like there's a few hotels that I would personally not even stay at. Circus, Stratosphere. I would not stay at those. If again, full grown man, absolutely welcome to. If you can handle yourself, go ahead. But there's just a lot. As somebody who grew up there for 18 years, my parents still live there. Like the things that you hear about those hotels is horrifying. So I definitely would not choose to stay at those two in particular, which they're kind of separate from the strip, so they're what I would include in the like bubble of do not stay. If
so, would you trust reviews?
Yes, trust reviews. Read them. If somebody's if a lot of people are complaining, like, oh, the front desk people are rude, so I'm going to give it 1 star. No, but I would trust. If somebody says there's bed bugs. If somebody said the water was dirty. If somebody said like, oh my God, I thought I heard noises of violent things in the middle of the night. You probably did. It's just Vegas is not the safest city when you're not careful, but also there's just so many people funneling in and out at all times because it's Las Vegas that like a lot of things slip through the cracks and you want to actually read those reviews because you're not always going to hear about it in the news.
Yeah. What about the seating then? So touching on like the different access points for the event. I know that we mentioned before, like there's general admission, but this was that kind of, I don't want to say controversial, maybe controversial, like tickets that they were selling where you're not given a view of the actual race itself. You're showing up in an area that has free soft drinks, maybe some food, and you're watching on screens. And then there's the grandstands and the typical experiences and paddock and all of that.
The best way
go ahead.
I was going to say the best way to describe the general admission tickets is if you've ever been to an IMAX movie, you're essentially going to be in an IMAX movie theater. The Sphere is so cool. If you look it up, they just launched it like last week. So cool. If you want to watch a race like that, no problem at all. It is amazing. It's full surround screens. It's really cool, but you will not see the actual race. I just want to make that super clear. And that's also like slightly off strip as well. So
yeah, so because I've seen, I mean, if you go to like an NFL game or something here in America, even basketball, they sell like stadium standing tickets where there's like a bar area, one of the ends where you can watch the match a little bit, mostly from the screens, but you're there for the vibe. And so those are usually a lot cheaper than like a reserved seat. And so that was what I figured that those seats would be. Having access to the Sphere, that's a plus. Because that thing looks awesome. I saw some videos of it last week, and yeah, it just looks ridiculous. It looks like it's definitely something to see. I don't know if it's going to be reserved for the concerts or not. That's one thing to keep in mind. But also, the general admission tickets were so limited that it was very hard to buy one. I've talked to like maybe 1 or 2 people that actually did come across them because they just sold out instantly. And so
I tried to get them. They could not get them. I'm glad I didn't because I didn't know that I wouldn't be able to see the track. But
yeah, and so it's supposed to be viewing platforms. If you have the actual general admission ticket, it's supposed to be viewing platforms along the inside perimeter of the circuit because the Sphere area has grandstands kind of around the outside of it, and that standing room ticket is supposed to be on the inside of it with some viewing platforms, and that's where some of the food area is going to be and stuff like that. But this circuit was kind of similar to Miami, where it's really hospitality focused. There's a lot of hospitality areas around the circuit with only a handful of grandstands. What I was talking about right now is that Sphere area, the kind of pink area at the top, where it's grandstands on the exterior side of it, and then the Sphere is in the center, and that's where the standing room only is going to be. Along the Koval zone is going to be hospitality. Though the purple and I guess teal, those are a mix of, I think, the track hospitality and of like F1 experiences, which are all sponsored and everything is catered and included. But those tickets are really pricey. I think they were 5,000 to 8,000 for the cheapest ones.
Yep. The cheapest
then,
grandstand that they have right now for 3-day is $1,500, and those are the ones in the Sphere Zone.
Yeah. And then the West Harmon Zone did have some. I think they might have been the same price for 1,500 at the final little corner right before the pitch straight. I think they were 1,500 or 1,800.
You're talking about the blue zone, no?
No, the green.
Oh, okay. Then yes.
West Harmon. Yeah, East Harmon. That's where I paid way too much. But I have a ticket for the main grandstand, kind of at the last section, top row, right by turn 1. And so that's where I'll be. But yeah, that ticket was $28.22 after taxes and fees for a 4-day ticket. It was originally a 3-day, but they upgraded it to a 4-day, and I now have access to the kickoff opening ceremony on Wednesday. And so that could be kind of cool. We'll see. And then around the turn 2 area are some more grandstands before you go to hospitality. Then along that area, there's one casino hotel. I can't remember what it's called, but they're selling their own grandstand package.
Ellis Island Hotel.
Yeah, Ellis Island.
That's insane. I didn't know that Ellis Island was still standing. Like, that's how little she's talked about.
Yeah, it's still there. What was it? Spider Pig from the community kept sending us over. I love the name, by the way.
Yeah.
But they were sharing this because I think they were looking at tickets here, but they have a beer garden, like a standing room viewing option. And then they have actual like grandstand seats that they're selling. Yeah.
I think over 2,000.
It was 1,500 for the grandstand, and then the beer garden was like starting at 250. But I know that they do 3 days, so that was probably like a 1-day, and then you could probably buy all 3.
Yeah, and one thing about all the grandstand tickets, they include food and non-alcoholic drink, so that's something to keep in mind. I saw the food menu, and I was kind of like, whatever. It just seems like I don't know, just basic food. I just wish it was kind of more of a meal and not just small finger foods included, as far as the way that they made it sound like.
How would you eat that at a grandstand seat?
Yeah, I definitely want a fried peanut butter and jelly sandwich to have with my beer at an F1 race.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, Caitlin, did you see that?
Yeah, I didn't, but that also just sounds terrible. Like all of everything involved in that sounds so bad.
Yeah, they have like jackfruit pulled pork tater tots.
That sounds cool.
Grilled cheese. Yeah, the tater tots do sound good. I'll definitely eat those. But yeah, some of the other stuff, it's just like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Adam, I'm not planning on getting a ticket. I just plan on being in the general vicinity. I'll be there, but I have not looked at the food and beverage options.
Yeah, and so the other big area, I guess, is along the Bellagio fountains, which they're building a massive grandstand in front of. So that's the one place that you'll see the cars along the main straight. There's a couple of different areas along that straight, but there are some pricier options at some of the properties, but they include you can get a package of either a hotel and grandstand or just grandstand tickets at this point, because I think they're just trying to get rid of tickets. So keep an eye out. And they also just released some tickets for Nevada residents, but the prices are still pretty high. The cheapest thing you can get, I think, was like a Thursday ticket for a few $100s. But there was still, I think a main grandstand ticket was like $1,300 for Saturday. And so they're not cheap, but it's cheaper than $2,500.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're trying to move, change your residency.
I was saying they're trying to offset the cost of like having to repave the entire strip, build everything from scratch, et cetera, et cetera. And so it makes sense. But at the same time, I have a feeling if people wait closer to the race, if not even the week of the race and don't have a ticket, but you're there, you're going to get some deals.
Yeah. They want people in seats.
Yeah, they don't want, this is going to be so heavily watched. Even if people have already tuned out from the season, it's Vegas. People are going to watch because more of a curiosity. They don't want those seats to be empty. That would look bad. So
what about out of the seat? Yeah, that's where we're going. Out of the seat.
Yeah. What am I doing in Vegas, Caitlin?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I was talking to my parents about this to ask them what would be open. I'm sorry.
I said, what time of day are we at? Well, you got to start with the time of day, what you're going to do.
Greg, let me talk. So, I mean, in Vegas, the first thing I want to start off with in November, people have argued with me about this, but I lived there for 18 years, did this for 18 years. It's cold. It is freezing in November in Vegas. Bring your parka, bring your jackets, bring your beanies and boots. It is very cold. During the day, it'll be in the 50s. At night, when the race is happening, it's going to drop to the 30s and be windy. Like I said, when I was talking about the planes landing, the wind chill will take it down to the 20s. It's colder there often than it is in New York City, where I live now. So just keep that in mind when you are outside watching the race at night with no heat except for the people next to you. In terms of having fun during the day, though, I would say the biggest thing is shopping. There's a lot of shopping. There's a lot to see in shopping centers. You don't have to be purchasing anything. Pretty much every hotel has a mall that is cool and different in some way, shape, or form. Aria has Crystals, which is a very, very high-end luxury mall, but has a lot of really cool art, a lot of really cool sculptures, just things to do and see. There's, of course, the Caesars Forum shops, which is basically a mile of shops in Caesars Palace. Lots of food. They do live shows within the actual Forum shops, and they kind of do like a recreation of Atlantis vibe at the end of them, which is always fun for kids to see, and adults if you're into that. There's also the Miracle Mile shops in Planet Hollywood. There's an entire mall called the Fashion Show Mall in the middle of the strip. But I will say during the day, those are probably the only things to do other than just walk around and see things. You could try going somewhere like Topgolf, which is also on the strip, or maybe walking around the Link Promenade, but there's a lot of question marks over what is actually going to be open. That's something that Vegas residents still don't know, and that's definitely not something that we as people attending the race are going to know until you kind of show up and they're like, hey, we're actually closed. At night, a lot easier question to answer. There's a million shows on the strip. We have the Cirque shows, which are amazing, definitely worth a watch. There's a lot of different magic acts. There's a lot of musicians that will be playing not in clubs, actual concert venues. I also believe Bruce Springsteen might have a concert that weekend. Somebody like that has a concert that weekend in Vegas. If you want to go to that instead of the race, you're absolutely welcome to do so. I will say with Cirque shows and magic shows, buy tickets day of. You don't need to buy them in advance. Just go to the box office and buy them, and you're going to get them for a huge discount. So that's just a fun fact from somebody who's definitely done that many times in her life. I will say you can see on the right here, the Link Promenade is kind of accented by the giant observation wheel. I don't know if it's going to be open. I'm going to assume the answer is no, it will not be running during the race, but it could be. So just keep that in mind as a possibility. And then, of course, the natural thing that everybody goes to Vegas for are the clubs. I don't know how in detail you want me to go with the clubs. If anybody has any guidelines there, I can get real in depth if you want.
I think the answer is why. What was that?
I saw Tiesto at Zouk back in February.
Yeah, I remember you telling me. I was very jealous of that.
This year?
Yeah.
That's so funny. I don't think
his residency's there now.
Yeah, he plays it once a month.
I'll
do a quick overline, just super quick. Girls, promoters are a thing. It is very safe. Find a promoter. DM them on Instagram, text them, whatever. If you have any men in your group or you are a group of men, you are either going to have to buy general admission tickets to the club and wait in line, or you're going to have to purchase a table with bottle service, which will start at $20,000 minimum at the big clubs.
For this weekend, I would be, yeah.
For this weekend, it's going to be $100,000 to even buy into a table, not including alcohol, the bottle service. So if you're planning on going to any clubs, just expect GA, or if you're women only, they are very strict on that. You can message a promoter. They are safe. They are run like a corporation there. They are not grimy. They are very safe to go out with because this is a 9 to 5 job. 5 to 9 job for them. They want Vegas to be safe because that's their lifeblood. So when you are going out with a promoter, they will make sure you are safe. I have never felt more safe than go out than in a Las Vegas club, which is like really shocking. But they take security very seriously there. So
Yeah, when I saw Tiesto at Zouk, I think a woman ticket for my wife was like $50, and mine was like 125 for men.
Yeah.
and every drink that you get's going to be like, even just a beer is going to be like $25. So,
Yeah, I think I was tipped. I tipped a bit, but I think it was 50 for a round of like 2 old fashions. So it wasn't completely terrible, but it's still not cheap. But I thought it was fairly cheap for Vegas because everywhere I went, a drink was $30.
Yeah. I mean, and also if I'm going to be honest here in terms of like going to clubs, I would expect if you're just, you know, a guy and not like girls or you don't have any connections, I would go somewhere more like Zouk than like an Omnia or an XS. Those are the 2 biggest nightclubs on the Strip. They have released their schedules for race week, and they are all Martin Garrix, Chainsmokers, Diplo, like all the big ones back to back to back to back. And it's going to be a lot of like high rollers that are prioritized over the standard person. I personally don't know if I'm going to be going, and I, you know the promoters from growing up and going to high school with them. So it is going to be a very interesting weekend. Even somebody that like grew up there and has family and friends that still live there, I have 100% question marks in my brain about everything. There's nothing that's for sure. And growing up in Vegas, like you also find out that every event that occurs there, there's question marks up until you're experiencing it. It's just not the greatest organization.
It's very thematic. It's a gamble.
It is. Oh my God, I love that. That's so good.
So yeah, let's start rounding this out. But one thing I wanted to touch on to get your insight on is, assuming all the roads are closed, how do I get around? Because I don't think I looked at the track website, and the promoter is saying that there's going to be specific Uber drop-offs for each zone.
Yes.
So hopefully that's a thing, but I imagine surge pricing is also going to be a big factor in the pricing of that. And so I believe that they're organizing some park and rides for people if they are driving in.
I would say if you're not staying on the Strip, again, I would drive, I would find a parking lot, and I would park your car there. This is not New York. This is not LA. Public parking exists. You can literally park in a grocery store parking lot and walk over if you want to. Again, neighborhood's not the safest, but if that's what you want to do, you are absolutely welcome to do that. They're not going to tow your car, which is great.
They also do mention that the monorail is supposed to be a good way of getting around.
That's a lie.
That's what they're saying.
That's a lie. Anybody who's been to Vegas knows that's a lie. The monorail stops every like 5 or 6 hotels. There's probably one stop that will be kind of center of the track, I would say, on like the back half of the track, the long straight back there. I don't know how to describe this. There will probably be a monorail stop there. Yeah, if you could bring it up, I can explain better. But there will be a monorail stop there. It's probably going to be in the dead center. So you would have to, that's not what I wanted, Greg.
Yep.
One moment. Yeah, okay. So there's definitely going to be, it is the front half, not the back half, a monorail stop kind of around Cromwell and Flamingo. But again, like there's one seating zone there. So that helps 0 people. The monorail is also just not reliable at all. The issue is that a lot of the grandstands, as you can see, those are not on the Strip. The Strip is where you see all of the names of the hotels at the bottom of your screen. That is actually, the map is reversed, but that is south of the Strip where everything is. So the monorail is nothing to you. It means nothing, unfortunately. I would Uber if you're somehow trying to navigate the Strip. So where it says the link, Flamingo, Cromwell, etc. They did say, I just read this before I started talking, that the sidewalks will be open during the day. So during the day, you will be able to walk around the Strip. You just will not be able to see the track because they'll have the walls up blocking you, essentially. You won't be able to walk on the track. You can't drive on the track, but you'll be able to walk on the sidewalk, which is nice. That's not something they had spoken about before. Other than that, just wait for further instruction. Like either rent a car or Uber, like you said. There's not really much.
Yeah, so the Vegas circuit does have an app now, and I think in there they will be updating the schedule and things like that. They do have some driver talk scheduled for Friday, and I believe, or Thursday and Friday. It seems like they're updating it quite a bit, but we'll also be having some of that stuff. Join the group chats and FanAmp. We'll be talking about all the stuff and sharing some info. We forgot, like you said, Spider Pig and I have been talking quite a bit about Vegas and sharing some info. I know they just recently started allowing the resale tickets, and so we've been talking about that, trying to see about potentially getting hospitality for one day. You never know if something's going to pop up, like Caitlin, like you said, last minute, or something that just drops in price drastically day of kind of thing. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, join the conversation in FanAmp and share some of the info, both for Mexico and for Vegas. And then we've also got Austin coming up. We've got a meetup scheduled for the Saturday. If you're in Austin, if you're coming to Coda, come join us. We'll be at Zucker Brewing at 8 p.m. on that Saturday. And so it is during the time of the concerts, but it's a good way to just kind of get out, explore, meet us. We'll be there. But there's going to be quite a few people, and you can always just splinter off after that because there's a ton of things to do in East Austin. And if you guys have any questions or anything like that, feel free to message me or just post in the subreddit or ask in the group chats on FanAmp. I'm pretty active on there, and I just like helping people and trying to make sure that people can have a good grasp on what they're going into, because the whole point of this is we're just trying to share some info and make things a little bit easier to try to get to these races, because there isn't a big platform to talk about this stuff. So,
yeah, we're pinning like events that are going on for any of the race weekends. We just did the meetups in Singapore and then in Suzuka, which were awesome to have with people. And I think Austin's going to be the biggest one yet by far, with some of the, like, obviously from all this community, Podium Life and F1 Destinations and others that are all there. So it's going to be a really great turnout. So definitely come hang out with all of us. And yeah, keep an eye on the app. We'll post any of the fan zone events on and off the track, any of that. So
yeah, we'll likely have a spontaneous meetup either at the circuit or afterwards on Friday evening as well. So just join the chats, and yeah, we'll see you there. Caitlin, and you got anything to add?
No.
Eduardo, you got anything to add? Any last minute things you thought about Mexico?
No, I mean, just if anyone is coming, enjoy the food, enjoy the country, and yeah, hopefully I can get to join you next year.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll have a chance to meet in person at some point.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, everyone.